When you hear 5G, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably faster downloads, right? And hey, you're not wrong. But that's kind of like saying a supercar is just about its paint job. The real revolution with 5G, the part that truly changes the game, is a complete overhaul of security and privacy. And that's exactly what we're going to break down today.
So, let me ask you something right off the bat. How safe do you think your phone's permanent identity is when it connects to a network? I mean, really safe. Because, as we're about to see, on older networks, well, the answer might not be as comforting as you'd hope. To really get why 5G is such a massive deal for security, we've got to go back and look at what came before it. 4G LTE was incredible, a huge leap forward for its time, but it had this one hidden flaw, a vulnerability lurking right at its core.
Now, don't get me wrong, 4G did a lot of things right. It brought in strong encryption and mutual authentication, which is just a fancy way of saying your phone and the cell tower checked each other's credentials to make sure they were legit. But, and this is a big but, look at that column on the right. 4G had a critical weakness. Under certain circumstances, your phone's permanent ID, the IMSI, could be broadcast openly, over the air. And that basically left the door wide open for you to be tracked.
And that's exactly where 5G comes in. This wasn't just about slapping a fresh coat of paint on 4G to get more speed. No way. The engineers went all the way back to the drawing board. They created a totally new security blueprint, designed from the ground up to fix those old problems for good.
So, the core of the 4G network was built like a pretty traditional, centralized system. The best way to picture it is a bunch of specialized hardware boxes, all physically wired together and tightly linked. It worked, for sure, but it was rigid, and there wasn't a lot of security between all those internal components.
5G just throws that whole model out the window. It uses what's called a service-based architecture. So instead of those rigid boxes, the 5G network core acts more like modern cloud software. It's a collection of separate, modular services that all talk to each other using secure APIs. This incredible flexibility is the secret ingredient to its much, much better security.
Okay, so how does this fancy new architecture actually solve that big identity problem we talked about earlier? Well, this right here is the main event. 5G was designed with one primary, crucial goal in mind: to make your permanent identity on the network totally invisible.
In the world of 5G, your permanent identity gets a new name. It's called the SUPI, or Subscription Permanent Identifier. But don't let the new name fool you. It serves the exact same purpose as that IMSI we were just talking about in 4G. It's you.
And here is the hero of our story, the SUPI, which stands for Subscription Concealed Identifier. This is the solution. Instead of your phone shouting its real ID, it sends this, a temporary encrypted version of your SUPI. It's created with some really powerful public key cryptography. And this one change is the absolute heart of 5G's privacy-first design. It's a total game changer. All right, let's walk through exactly how this works, step by step. Your phone knows its permanent SUPI, but, and this is key, it never ever broadcasts that identity in the clear. Before it even tries to connect, it takes that SUPI, encrypts it using the network's public key, and turns it into that temporary SUSI. Only then is that encrypted SUSI sent over the air. This single mechanism makes those tracking devices called IMSI catchers totally obsolete on a true 5G network. One that isn't falling back on older 4G systems.
Okay, so protecting your identity, that's huge. But believe it or not, 5G's security redesign goes way, way deeper than that. It's about securing the entire network from the inside out, building a system that's more resilient and smartly divided up. Let's take a look.
One of the most powerful tricks up 5G's sleeve is something called network slicing. It basically lets a carrier take their one giant physical network infrastructure and digitally slice it up into multiple, completely isolated virtual networks, and each slice can be perfectly tailored for a specific job.
For instance, a carrier could create one slice just for our everyday high-speed internet on our phones, then a second slice that's ultra-reliable for critical medical IoT devices, and maybe a third, super low-latency slice for autonomous cars. Now, the crucial part is that these slices are logically separate. It's like they have digital brick walls between them. This means a security breach on the consumer internet slice has no way of jumping over and messing with the slice for critical infrastructure. They're contained.
And hey, remember that service-based architecture we talked about? Because all the internal parts of the 5G core are talking to each other through those secure APIs, the communication itself is protected. This is a big difference from 4G.
Now, even the links between internal network functions are locked down with strong cryptography. It's just another powerful layer of defense.
So when you start putting all these pieces together, the encrypted identities, the cloud-like core, the network slicing, it becomes pretty clear that this is way more than just an upgrade. It really marks the beginning of a whole new philosophy for mobile networks, one where security and privacy aren't just an afterthought, they're baked in from the very beginning.
This table really puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? Let's just look at them side by side. With 4G, your identity could be exposed. With 5G, it's always encrypted. Where 4G had a rigid, centralized architecture, 5G has a flexible, service-based one. Limited isolation in 4G becomes robust network slicing in 5G. It's not just an improvement, it's a complete architectural overhaul.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. We're not just talking about adding a few new features here. It is a fundamental philosophical shift. 5G builds security in a modular, privacy-focused way, just like how all modern cloud software is built.
You know, this isn't happening in a vacuum. It's all part of this bigger story, this evolution of mobile security. We started with just basic authentication back in the early GSM days. Then we moved to the more complex, layered cryptography of LTE. And now, we're at 5G's privacy-centric and service-oriented model. And if you look ahead, the industry is already sketching out 6G, which is likely going to be built around a concept called zero trust.
And that kind of leaves us with one final, pretty interesting question to think about. If 5G's big leap forward was encrypting our identity and slicing up the network, what comes next? What does a true zero-trust network, one that trusts absolutely nothing by default, inside or out, what will that actually look like for the future of how we all communicate?